In the 20th century, the competition between the US and the USSR caused a race in terms of science, weapons, weaponry, and culture. This caused a cultural and a scientific revolution throughout the world, pushing humanity further than it would have gone otherwise. Similarly, in Indian history, a competition between a kingdom from Rajasthan, a kingdom from Bengal, and a kingdom from Karnataka pushed the Indian warfare and its culture ahead a few hundred years just out of competition. This was around the 8th and the 9th century. So, how did it happen? The Gupta Empire is often considered to be the golden age of ancient India. It had a complete peaceful domination over the northern half of the Indian subcontinent. And then it fell apart, giving way to dozens of smaller kingdoms that would not last more than a generation. There was a century and a half of complete chaos in the northern regions of the subcontinent. The Chalukyas of Badami were one of few kingdoms that brought stability in the Deccan area of India. But to the north, there were just smaller kingdoms. In all of this chaos, there was a bright spot in the western half of the Ganga region of India with the Makhari dynasty. They managed to survive for more than a couple of generations and even managed to expand by defeating the later Guptas. They were overthrown by Harshavardhan, who reigned over the empire for more than 50 years and expanded it further. He conquered in every direction and became a bright spot in this age of darkness. This caused the capital of his empire, Kannauj, to grow in significance. Even after a century of his fall and a century of weak kings, Kannauj was still the economic and the cultural center of northern India, becoming the prize for the emerging powers at the time. What were these powers? The Gujarati Pratiharas. This map is a spoiler for the video. Use this map instead. The most interesting thing about the Gujarati Pratiharas is that we don't know where they come from. The leading theory is that they come from the Huns that invaded just a century before they started becoming a kingdom, and then after falling apart they became the Rajput kingdoms. Another speculation is that they came from lower caste sheep herders who created a myth around their ancestry, and so they became kings. For the first theory, the Huns were a destructive force that brought unparalleled destruction to India, and then they settled in Rajasthan, and so they probably became the Gujarati Pratiharas. So the Rajputs are descendant from the Huns. That explains r/Rajputana. It's a speculation based entirely on proximity. That's where they ended up settling, and that's where the Gujarati Pratiharas came from. So that's all it is, speculation. They called themselves Pratiharas because they claimed descendants from Lakshman, who was also called Pratihara, or the gatekeeper for Ram. Meanwhile, their neighbors, they called them Gujaras. They were fiduciaries of the Chavdas of Bhilmara, and they gained power after a battle with the Umayyad Caliphate. For the entirety of its history, the Pratiharas kept resisting the Arab invaders, to the point that even the Arabs acknowledged their might and how they couldn't beat them. Damn, that's very cool. Pala dynasty was the most powerful dynasty of the Gauda kingdom, the founders of the Bengali identity. Gauda kingdom kept coming back. They were there before the Gupta Empire, they were a fiduciary to the Gupta Empires, and they stuck around even after the fall of Gupta Empire. They vanished for a while under the reign of the Harshavardhan Empire, but then they came back again. This time, though, there was a lot of chaos, and there were many warring warlords. But this chaos ended when all of them came together and elected Gopala, the first king of the Pala dynasty, to the throne. What followed was 4 centuries of relative peace and prosperity, also considered the golden age of Bengal. Before this kingdom, for at least a century, there was an age of constant civil wars in Bengal. It was a dog-eat-dog world, and that's when the Pala dynasty emerged. And what happens when you have relative peace in the core lands of your empire? You start conquering. And pretty soon too, the second king of this dynasty got into the Tripartite Struggle with the Gujarati Pratiharas and Rashtrakutas came to power after overthrowing the Chalukyas of Badami. Their main power was somewhere in Karnataka. Their main achievement, a revolution in temple building. The Kailasa temple in Ellora caves is their creation, and so are all these. This changed how temples were made forever. Their other achievement was that they made their mother tongue Kannada become as important as Tamil and Sanskrit, which was almost unheard of for any kingdom. They were called one of the 4 pillars of the world, and their armies were some of the most formidable. That sounds familiar. Precisely. 3 empires, all 3 called the strongest of their time, with unparalleled armies, each of them fielding their own cultural revolution. All 3 of them with mysterious origins and relatively mysterious ends. All 3 coming to power around 750 AD. All 3 claimed superiority because they claimed Kannauj. Huh? Who was right then? All of them. Huh? Let's see how the battles played out, shall we? Well, it started when the 3rd king of the Pratiharas, Vatsraja, invaded the Kannauj kingdoms, which in 785. He made the weak king of Kannauj accept his overlordship. Drunk on his power, he continued eastward and even invaded the Pala Empire and looted their treasure. As he was returning to his kingdom with his spoils of war, the Rashtrakuta king Dhruv marched up north and attacked a now weakened army of the Pratiharas, and he won, routing the Pratihara king back to the desert. So he third-partied the conflict. Not only that, Dharampal, the king of the Pala kingdom, tried to third-party this conflict and tried to defeat Dhruv, but got defeated instead. So the Rashtrakutas ended up with Kannauj. No, they looted both the armies and left. So who ended up with Kannauj? The Palas. What? Seeing that the king of the Rashtrakutas had returned and the king of the Gujarati Pratiharas weakened, the Palas took the opportunity to invade Kannauj. And then they held a party and coronated their relatives over the throne of Kannauj. So the Palas won? Well, 7 years later, the Gujarati Pratiharas were returning to power. Fearing that they would grow too strong, the now king of the Rashtrakuta Empire, Govinda III, attacked and took their holdings in Madhya Pradesh and Gujarat from the Gujarati Pratiharas. How does this connect with Kannauj? Spooked by such comprehensive victories, the Palas gave up their claim over the Kannauj without a fight. And so the Rashtrakutas claimed their superiority over Kannauj right after. So the Rashtrakutas won? Well, you see, 14 years later, the Rashtrakuta king Govinda III died. This started diminishing the Rashtrakuta control over northern India. So the Pratihara king Nagarbhatta II invaded Kannauj and he won. He even made Kannauj the capital of his empire. Taking this opportunity, the Palas gathered all their vassals and decided to attack and take over Kannauj. But they were unable to, as the Pratiharas defeated the Palas, becoming the sole king of North India. For 100 years, all kings in India recognized the superiority of the Gujarati Pratiharas as they controlled Kannauj. Even as the Arabs and later the Turks invaded from the west and the Palas kept attacking them and the Rashtrakutas kept causing problems, they still held on for those 100 years until their fiduciaries started rebelling and the empire started falling apart. And then the Rashtrakuta Empire conquered Kannauj again, and then the Pala Empire conquered Kannauj again. Yeah, it went around. Then a Rajput king from Rajasthan drove them both away and installed a Gujarati king on the throne of Kannauj as his puppet. That's where he continued to rule until the Ghaznavids attacked. The Palas, for their part, held on for centuries after the Tripartite Struggle. They shifted on to a reserve family and continued to rule over Bengal, even if they had to hold it on with all their might, until the Gujarati Pratiharas weakened and they started gaining their lands back. Even as the Ghaznavids defeated them, they held on. Even as the Rajput kingdoms that came later took power, they still held on until Muhammad of Ghori attacked, and then, well, bye-bye Hindu North kingdoms. The Rashtrakuta Empire was the first to fall because of the resurgent Chola Empire to its south, the Pratihara Empire to its north, and its rebellions in the eastern Chalukya to its east. It slowly started falling apart, and eventually Western Chalukyas overthrew them. Everything changed because of this. It was an arms race. It was a cultural race. And that happened because 3 strong empires existed at the same time, and they tried to get gain overlordship over the same piece of land. The way they built their temples and cities and even castles changed forever, and all three of them emerged with stronger and newer literary traditions. The languages of Bengali, Kannada and Apabhramsha, as well as Sanskrit, flourished with plays and poems during this time. The administration of the empires also evolved during this time. Strife and conflict, it seems that that's what forces empires to grow the most, and the tripartite struggle is the best example of